The woman appeared at his gate like a ghost summoned by the desert wind, wrapped in black from head to toe, her face hidden behind a heavy mourning veil that caught the dying light of dusk. Thomas Hart had been mending fence wire when he first spotted her silhouette against the red mesa, walking with the careful steps of someone carrying unbearable weight. "Don't look at me," she whispered when he approached, her voice cracking like dried leather. "Please don't look at me." She collapsed against the weathered fence post, her shoulders shaking with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than grief. The veil trembled with each breath, and Thomas found himself frozen, his calloused hands still gripping the wire cutters, unsure whether to step closer or retreat to the safety of his cabin. 20 years of ranching in New Mexico territory had taught him to read danger in the way vultures circled or cattle scattered, but this woman carried a different kind of threat, one that made his chest tighten with a fear he couldn't name. Her dress, what he could see of it beneath the heavy black shawl, was torn and stained with something that might have been blood or mud or both. "You hurt, ma'am?" he asked, his voice gentler than the desert had heard in months. She flinched at the sound, pressing herself harder against the post. "Don't come closer. Don't. If you see me, you'll understand why they wouldn't let me stay, why they made me leave." The sun slipped behind the mountains, painting the sky the color of old wounds, and Thomas Hart found himself caught between his natural impulse to help and something deeper, more primitive, a warning that whispered in his bones. In the growing darkness, her figure seemed to blur at the edges, as if she might disappear entirely if he blinked. But she didn't disappear. She remained there, a mystery wrapped in mourning cloth, and as the first stars appeared overhead, Thomas realized that whatever had brought her to his remote ranch would change everything he thought he knew about mercy, about judgment, and about the thin line between salvation and damnation that ran through every human heart. Thomas set down his tools and took a careful step forward. "There's a storm coming in from the east. You can't stay out here." "I can't." She shook her head violently, the veil rippling. "You don't understand. I'm not like other women anymore." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain, and something else, something medicinal and strange, that made his horse whinny nervously from the corral. Thomas had seen his share of broken people drift through the territory, survivors of Apache raids, women fleeing violent husbands, men running from crimes they couldn't undo, but this felt different. "My name's Thomas Hart," he said, keeping his distance but settling into a crouch to seem less threatening. "This here's my land, and anyone who needs shelter is welcome to it. No questions asked." "Questions?" She laughed, a sound like glass breaking. "Oh, you'll have questions. Everyone does before they run." He studied her posture, the way she held herself as if expecting a blow. "Someone hurt you." "Hurt me?" The veil fluttered as she turned toward him. "They tried to heal me. The doctor in Santa Fe, with his bottles and his promises, said the laudanum would help with the pain, that the mercury treatments would cure what couldn't be cured." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Instead they made me into something that frightens children and makes grown men cross themselves." Thomas felt his stomach tighten. Mercury treatments, he'd heard whispers of such things, desperate attempts to cure diseases that polite society refused to name. "The doctor did this to you. The disease did this. The doctor just finished what was already started." She pressed her hands to the veil. "Please, just let me die out here with some dignity. Don't make me show you what I've become." The first fat raindrops hit the dust around them, and Thomas made his choice. "Ma'am, I've seen men torn up by bears, faces crushed by horse kicks, skin burned black by desert sun. Whatever you think you look like, it won't be the worst thing these eyes have witnessed." As if summoned by his words, the distant sound of hoofbeats echoed across the desert, riders approaching fast, their voices carrying on the wind. The woman's entire body went rigid. "They followed me," she breathed. "They're coming to finish what they started in town." The riders crested the hill like a dark tide, 6 men on horseback with torches that cut through the gathering storm. Thomas recognized the lead rider immediately, Sheriff Caldwell from Santa Fe, a man who confused authority with righteousness and had never met a problem he couldn't solve with rope and flame. "Hart," Caldwell's voice boomed across the ranch. "You got a sick woman there needs collecting." Thomas stepped between the riders and the veiled figure, his hand instinctively moving to the Colt at his hip. "This is private property, Sheriff. You got business here. You better state it plain." "Business is collecting a dangerous woman who fled medical custody." Caldwell spat into the dust, his torch casting dancing shadows across his weathered face. "Dr. Morrison's orders. She's carrying plague, Hart. Contaminated. Needs to be contained before she spreads her poison to decent folks." Behind Thomas, the woman made a sound like a wounded animal. "They want to lock me away," she whispered, "like the others, in that place outside town where no one can hear you scream." The rain began in earnest now, hissing against the torches and turning the ground to mud. Lightning flickered overhead, illuminating the standoff in stark, violent detail. Thomas could see the fear in the riders' eyes, the way they kept their distance even with superior numbers. Whatever they'd seen of this woman had left its mark on them too. "She's on my land now," Thomas said quietly, "under my protection." "Your protection?" Caldwell laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You don't even know what she is, do you? What she's got eating her from the inside out? Take one look under that veil, Hart, and you'll be begging us to take her away." The woman's sobbing grew louder, more desperate. "Don't let them take me back to that place. Please, I'd rather die clean under the stars than rot in their cellar." Thomas felt the weight of decision pressing down on him like the storm clouds overhead. 6 armed men versus 1 rancher and a sick woman. The smart play was to step aside, let them take her, return to his quiet life of cattle and solitude. But something in her voice, in the way she'd said she wanted to die with dignity, made that impossible. "Last chance, Hart," Caldwell warned, his hand moving toward his weapon. "Step aside, or we'll move you aside." The thunder rolled across the desert like God's own judgment, and Thomas Hart realized he was about to find out what kind of man he really was. Thomas raised his hand slowly, stepping back toward the woman. "All right, Sheriff. You want her, you can have her. But first I got a right to see what I'm giving up." Caldwell's eyes narrowed with suspicion, but he nodded. "Do it, Hart. Look at what she is. Then you'll understand why she can't stay among civilized people." Thomas turned to face the veiled woman, who had pressed herself against the fence post like a cornered animal. "Ma'am, I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" She shook her head frantically. "You don't know what you're asking. When you see, you'll hate me, just like the others." "Maybe," Thomas said softly, "but that's my choice to make, isn't it?" The rain plastered his hair to his scalp as he knelt before her, eye level with the dark fabric that hid her face. With infinite gentleness, he reached for the edge of the veil. She whimpered but didn't pull away. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sarah," she whispered. "Sarah Whitmore. Well, Sarah Whitmore, I'm going to look at you now, and whatever I see, you're still a woman who needs help, and I'm still a man who can provide it." He lifted the veil. The mercury treatments had left her face a patchwork of silver-gray scars that caught the lightning like broken glass. Where her left eye should have been was only scarred tissue, and the right side of her mouth was pulled into a permanent twisted grimace. The disease and the cure had warped her features into something that belonged more to nightmare than to the waking world. Thomas Hart looked at her ruined face and fell to his knees, not in horror, but in recognition of suffering so profound it made his own troubles seem small and selfish. "Oh, Sarah," he breathed, and she flinched as if struck. But he didn't turn away. Instead he reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a small silver locket, the only thing he had left of his wife, who'd died of consumption 3 winters past. "This was Margaret's," he said, placing it gently in Sarah's trembling hands. "She always said the prettiest thing about a person wasn't what you could see, but what you could feel when they looked at you with kindness." Sarah stared at the locket through her one good eye, tears streaming down her scarred cheeks. "You're not afraid of me." "I'm terrified," Thomas admitted, "but not of how you look. I'm afraid of what those men will do to you if I let them take you." Sheriff Caldwell's voice cut through the rain like a blade. "You satisfied now, Hart? Ready to let us do what needs doing?" Thomas stood slowly, his hand still resting protectively on Sarah's shoulder. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet authority of a man who'd found his line in the sand and would not be moved from it. "What needs doing, Sheriff?" is for you and your boys to ride back to town and tell Doc Morrison that Sarah Whitmore died out here in the storm, peaceful like. You can't hide her forever, Hart. Don't plan to hide her, plan to help her heal, the parts that can be healed. The rest, well, the rest is between her and God. Caldwell's torch hissed in the rain as he leaned forward in his saddle. You're making a mistake that'll cost you everything. Your reputation, your standing in the community, maybe your life, maybe, Thomas agreed, but some mistakes are worth making. The standoff stretched like a taut wire until finally, Caldwell spat again and wheeled his horse around. Come winter, when she's dead, and you're sick too, remember this conversation, Hart. Remember that you chose this. The riders disappeared into the storm, their torches swallowed by darkness and distance. Thomas helped Sarah to her feet, steadying her as she clutched Margaret's locket like a lifeline. Why, she asked as they walked toward the cabin, why would you risk everything for someone like me? Thomas paused at his door, looking back at the desert where the riders had vanished. Because Margaret always said the measure of a man isn't in what he's willing to take, but in what he's willing to give up for someone who can't repay the kindness. Inside the warm cabin, by the light of oil lamps and the crackle of a wood fire, Sarah Whitmore lowered her veil for the second time that night. This time, she didn't apologize for what Thomas saw. Years later, when travelers asked about the scarred woman who helped tend his cattle in the garden she'd coaxed from the stubborn desert soil, Thomas Hart would simply say that she'd been the finest neighbor a man could ask for. Some gifts, he learned, came wrapped in unexpected packages, and the greatest mercy wasn't in being loved despite your scars, but in finding someone brave enough to see past them to the person still fighting to survive underneath. The desert kept their secret, and Sarah Whitmore learned that sometimes salvation came not from being healed, but from being seen, accepted, and allowed to heal others in return. In the end, that was enough.